Who are you? You are not my bride. Where is Esther?
Michael, please listen to me. She told me to come. She said she needed time. This is not the real bride. Something is wrong here. As is happening in my daughter's wedding.
Stop that wedding right now! This is my wedding, not hers!
She thought her wedding day was going to be perfect until her cousin walked down the aisle in her place. My name is Esther, Esther Eze, and what I am about to tell you is not a movie. It is not something I read in a book. It happened to me on the one day of my life I had planned, prayed for, and dreamed about since I was a little girl sitting in my mother's parlor, watching Nollywood wedding scenes with wide, hopeful eyes. I was 29 years old. I had waited my whole life for that Saturday morning. Not because I was desperate, not because I had no sense of self without a man. No, I had waited because Michael, my Michael, was the kind of man you do not rush. You build with a man like that. You pour yourself into something real, something honest, something that takes 4 years of choosing each other, even when life makes it easy to walk away. And that morning, we were finally sealing it before God, before family, before everyone who had ever doubted us. I was seated at the vanity in my bridal suite at the Grand Prestige Hotel in Lagos. My makeup artist, Tolu, was doing the final touches on my face. My maid of honor, Shisom, was fussing with my veil, pulling it this way and that, trying to get it to sit perfectly. My mother was in the corner of the room, hands clasped, eyes glistening with tears she was too proud to let fall, whispering something under her breath. A prayer, most likely, the kind only a mother prays on the morning she watches her daughter step into a new life. The room smelled of shea butter, white roses, and the faint sweetness of the fried plantain drifting up from the hotel kitchen downstairs. It was warm. It was full of laughter and perfume and love. It felt like the beginning of everything good. Then, my phone buzzed. A message from my cousin Linda. Esther, come quickly. There's a problem with the cake delivery. The hotel staff won't let the vendors in without a signature from the bride. Please come now. The wedding coordinator is panicking. I frowned. I looked at Chisom. She shrugged. Go and sort it quickly. You have time. I should have listened to the cold knot tightening inside my chest, that quiet, uneasy whisper that said, don't go. But I silenced it because Linda was family, because we had grown up together, shared the same grandmother's compound in Enugu during school holidays, plaited each other's hair on Sunday evenings, because even though something about her always felt slightly off around Michael, the way she laughed too loudly at his jokes, the way her eyes followed him across every room, I had told myself I was imagining things. I grabbed my robe, told Tolu I would be back in 5 minutes, and followed the direction Linda had texted, room 214, second floor, service corridor. The corridor was quiet, too quiet for a hotel hosting a wedding. And then the door opened, and everything changed. I stepped into room 214 and saw nothing. No cake vendor, no hotel staff, no wedding coordinator in panic. Just an empty room with the curtains half drawn and the low hum of the air conditioning filling the silence. Linda, I called out. The door clicked shut behind me. I spun around. Linda was standing there, back against the door, arms folded, wearing a smile I had never seen on her face before. It was not a warm smile. It was slow, calculated, like she had been practicing it. Linda, what is going on? Where is the cake vendor? She tilted her head. There is no cake vendor, Esther. My stomach dropped. What do you mean there is no... Sit down, she said, quietly, almost gently, and that gentleness frightened me more than if she had screamed. I am not sitting down. I am getting married in 2 hours. Move away from the door. She did not move. I looked at her properly then, the way you look at someone when something shifts and you suddenly see them clearly for the first time. Linda was 31, 2 years older than me. We had the same grandmother, The same dark skin, the same oval face that people always said made us look like sisters more than cousins. We were almost the same height, almost the same build. A terrible feeling began to crawl up my spine. Linda, my voice dropped. What have you done? She laughed softly and reached into the wardrobe behind her. She pulled out a wedding gown, white, long, with lace detailing along the sleeves and a cathedral train. It was not exactly my dress, but it was close enough to make my blood run cold. Close enough that, from a distance, especially to guests who had never seen my gown up close, it could pass. You have been with Michael for 4 years, she said, smoothing the dress against herself, almost lovingly. I have known him for 7 years, Esther. I introduced you to. Did you forget that? I brought him to that Christmas party. I sat next to him all night. I was the one who laughed at his jokes, who listened to his dreams, who told him he was going to be something great. Her voice cracked slightly. And then you walked in wearing that red dress and he never looked at me again. The room felt like it was tilting. Linda, I am not finished. She straightened. The softness vanished. Today, I am going to that church and I am going to stand at that altar. And by the time anyone figures out what happened, it will be too late. I lunged for the door. She was faster. She pressed the button on her phone and 2 seconds later, someone knocked. When she opened the door, a large man I had never seen before stepped inside and stood between me and the exit, arms crossed, face blank. Who is that? I whispered. Someone who owes me a favor. You will not be harmed, Esther. I just need a few hours. After the ceremony, everything will be sorted. Just stay calm. She picked up my phone from where I had left it on the table. She dropped it into her bag. The door closed. The lock turned. And I was alone. I stood in that room and I felt something I had never felt before in my life, a helplessness so deep and so violent that it turned quickly into rage. I screamed. I banged on the door until my palms burned. I kicked the wall until my toes ached through my slippers. I pressed my ear to the door and heard Linda's heels clicking away down the corridor, fading, gone. My wedding was happening in 2 hours, and I was locked in a hotel room with no phone, no shoes, and no way out. At that same moment, while I was pacing that room in tears, while the walls felt like they were closing in on me, something strange was happening at Victory Life Church on the other side of Lagos. I only know what happened next because people told me. Guests, relatives, the ushers, even Michael himself later when he could bring himself to speak about it without his jaw tightening. Linda arrived at the church. She came in a white car, the same color we had booked. She wore that gown, the one that was close enough to fool anyone who had not seen mine up close. She had done her makeup heavily, the way I sometimes did for formal occasions. She wore a veil that covered most of her face. She carried a bouquet of white and blush roses that she had clearly bought in a hurry. They were slightly wilted at the edges if you looked closely, but nobody was looking closely. They were looking at the bride. She walked slowly, deliberately, the way someone walks when they have rehearsed it. The wedding march began to play, and 300 guests rose to their feet. My mother was already seated in the front row, dabbing her eyes. She assumed I was on my way down the aisle. She assumed the figure in white approaching was her daughter. She smiled. She pressed her handkerchief to her lips. She did not know. Michael was standing at the altar. He told me later that something felt wrong the moment he saw her walking toward him. Not in a way he could name, just a strangeness, a wrongness in the air. The way you feel when a song you know is being played in a slightly different key. He thought it was nerves. He told himself to breathe. But as Linda drew closer, as the veil shifted slightly in the breeze from the open church doors, he saw her face. His smile faded. He leaned toward his best man, Jerome, and said quietly, "That is not Esther." Jerome frowned. "What?" "That is not Esther," Michael repeated, now louder. A murmur moved through the congregation like a wave, heads turning, whispers, confusion. Linda kept walking, chin raised, eyes forward, as if sheer boldness could rewrite reality. She reached the altar and lifted her veil. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I have ever been described to me. My mother stood up from her seat slowly. An auntie in the third row gasped out loud. Someone's child somewhere in the middle of the church asked in a carrying voice, "Mommy, where is Auntie Esther?" Michael stared at Linda. His face was stone. "Where is Esther?" he said. Not a shout, quiet, controlled, the kind of quiet that is more frightening than shouting. And Linda, God help her, smiled at him. She actually smiled, and she said, "Michael, she asked me to come. She got cold feet. She sent me to tell you." "She sent you?" His voice did not rise. "Esther sent you in a wedding gown to stand at our altar?" "She was scared. You know how she gets. She just needed more time." "Where is she, Linda?" The congregation had erupted now. My mother was already moving toward the aisle. Jerome had his phone out. The wedding coordinator was speaking rapidly into a walkie-talkie near the entrance. And Linda, still standing at that altar, still wearing that dress, still holding those wilted roses, looked around at all the faces staring back at her. And for the first time, something flickered behind her eyes. Not remorse, not yet. Fear. If you have been glued to this story from the beginning, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and do not go anywhere, because what happens next will leave your mouth wide open. Back in room 214, I had stopped screaming. Not because I had given up. I want you to understand that. Esther Eze does not give up. But screaming was not working, and I needed to think clearly. I needed to use my head. I sat on the edge of the bed, pressed my palms flat against my knees, and I breathed. The room had a landline phone on the bedside table. I had not noticed it in my panic. I grabbed it and dialed the front desk. "Good morning, Grand Prestige Hotel. How may I?" "Please listen to me," I said. My voice was shaking, but my words were clear. "My name is Esther Eze. I am the bride. I am booked in the bridal suite on the 3rd floor. I have been locked inside room 214 against my will. I need security to come here immediately. My wedding is happening right now, and I am locked inside this room. Please, please help me." A pause. "Ma'am, did you say you are locked in?" "Yes, room 214. Please hurry." 3 minutes. It took 3 minutes for the security guard to arrive with a master key. 3 minutes that felt like 30 years. I sat on that bed and I thought about Michael standing at that altar. I thought about my mother in the front row. I thought about the 4 years, every argument we had pushed through, every night I had cried on the phone with him, every plan we had made together about the house we would build and the children we would raise and the life that was supposed to start today. And I thought about Linda. Linda, who had sat at our introduction ceremony smiling and clapping. Linda, who had called me 2 weeks ago to say how happy she was for me. Linda, who had asked to see my wedding gown at the fitting. And now I understood why. Linda, who had stood close enough, long enough to memorize the details, the lace, the train, the silhouette. I thought about all the times I had defended her when others said she was jealous. All the times my mother had said, "Esther, that girl watches you too closely." All the times Chisom had told me something is not right about Linda around Michael. And I had hushed them all. I had called them bitter. I had said, "She is my blood." Blood. What a word. The door opened. The security guard looked at me, barefoot, trembling, robe half falling off my shoulder, mascara tracking down my cheeks, and his eyes went wide. "Madam," I said, "I need a car right now, and I need someone to call Victory Life Church on Lagos Island. Tell them the real bride is on her way." I did not wait for him to process it. I was already moving down the corridor. My veil was gone, my shoes were in the bridal suite, I was in a robe and bare feet, and I did not care. Let them see me. Let every person in that church see exactly what had been done to me. Because I was done being quiet. The hotel manager met me at the lobby entrance, flustered and apologetic, already calling the driver. Someone pressed a pair of flat sandals into my hands. I think it was one of the receptionists. A woman wrapped a shawl around my shoulders. these strangers were kinder to me in those 2 minutes than my own cousin had been in 29 years. The car pulled out of the hotel compound, and I sat in the back seat with my hands in my lap, staring straight ahead, tears drying on my face. I was going to my wedding, and God help anyone who tried to stop me. The driver later told me he had never driven that fast in Lagos traffic in his life, but I do not remember the journey. I do not remember the roads or the traffic or the heat. I only remember the moment the car stopped in front of Victory Life Church and I saw the white ribbon still tied to the gate and the wedding banner with our photograph, Michael and Esther, united in love. And something inside me broke and rebuilt itself at the same time. I pushed open the car door before it fully stopped. I walked through those church gates with no veil, no shoes worth speaking of, in a robe and a borrowed shawl. And I pushed open the heavy wooden doors of the church. The sound that hit me was chaos. 300 voices talking at once. I could see Linda at the altar, still standing there, still in that dress, and Michael beside her, arms crossed, jaw set, not touching her, not looking at her the way a man looks at his bride, looking at her the way a man looks at something that has deeply offended him. My mother saw me first. Esther! The scream that came out of my mother's body was the scream of a woman whose heart had been squeezed and then suddenly released. She pushed past 2 aunties and ran toward me. Behind her, Chisom was already crying. Jerome was pointing. The congregation turned. And the noise, the beautiful, chaotic, overwhelming noise of 300 people reacting all at once, washed over me like water. Michael turned. He saw me, and I watched something happen to his face that I will carry with me for the rest of my life. The stone broke. The control he had been holding cracked open. He stepped off that altar and walked toward me, not quickly, but with the kind of certainty that moves through crowds, and people parted for him, and he came to me, and he held my face in both his hands and looked at me for a long moment without speaking. I knew, he said finally. The moment she started walking toward me, I knew it was not you. I could not speak. I pressed my forehead against his. But we were not done, because Linda who had spent the whole morning building this lie, was not ready to let it collapse. She raised her voice above the noise of the congregation, and she said loudly, clearly, with remarkable composure, for a woman standing in someone else's wedding dress at someone else's altar. Esther has always been anxious about commitment. You all know that. Her own mother knows that. I was just trying to help. Enough. The voice came from the back of the church. Everyone turned. It was Da, the wedding photographer. A quiet man in his 30s who had spent the morning setting up cameras in every corner of the church and the hotel. He walked slowly up the aisle with his laptop open, screen facing forward, and he stopped in the middle of the congregation. I was reviewing footage from the hotel before leaving for the church, he said calmly. The hotel gave me access to their corridor cameras because I needed the arrival shot of the bride. I have footage from the 2nd floor corridor, time-stamped, this morning. The silence was absolute. Da turned the laptop screen to face the congregation and pressed play. The footage was clear, sharp enough. There was Linda, unmistakably Linda, no veil, no disguise, walking down the 2nd floor corridor of the Grand Prestige Hotel, carrying a garment bag. She stopped outside the bridal suite. She knocked. She was let in, by me, I realized, because I had not yet been lured away. Then the footage jumped to a second clip. Linda walking back down the corridor, this time with the garment bag full, the bouquet in her hand, moving quickly. And behind her, the door to room 214 being pulled shut by the large man who had stood guard over me. 300 people watched in silence. Then Da said quietly, "There is also a recording of the phone call used to lure the bride away from her suite. The hotel's in-house system logs all calls made from registered rooms. The call to the bride came from room 214. which was booked under Linda's name. The sound that rose from that congregation was something between a gasp and a roar. I looked at Linda. I want to tell you that she crumbled dramatically, that she fell to her knees and wept and begged, but that is not what happened. What happened was actually more devastating than any dramatic collapse. She just stilled. The confidence drained from her face slowly, like water finding its way out of a cracked vessel. Her shoulders dropped. The bouquet, my bouquet, fell from her fingers and hit the floor. And she stood there in that dress, surrounded by 300 people who now knew exactly what she had done, and she had nothing left. No more words, no more performance, just the truth displayed on a laptop screen in the middle of the church she had walked into as a thief. My mother walked to Linda slowly. I thought she was going to slap her. My mother is from Enugu. She has hands that have meaning behind them. But she did not slap her. She stopped in front of Linda and she said in Igbo, quietly enough that only those close by could hear, "The child who steals the wrapper from a sleeping woman will wear it to her own funeral." Then she turned her back and walked to stand beside me. The pastor, bless that man, cleared his throat and spoke into his microphone. He said, "I believe we have a wedding to complete." And the church erupted. Someone found my actual gown. It was still in my bridal suite. Chisom ran back to retrieve it. My makeup was redone in 20 minutes in the church vestibule, while 3 aunties hovered over Tulu like supervisors. Michael stood outside the vestibule door the entire time, refusing to move, talking to me through the gap, telling me ridiculous jokes until I laughed through my tears, until my hands stopped shaking, until I remembered that this day still belonged to us. Linda was escorted from the church premises by 2 ushers and the church security. She did not resist. She walked out with her head down, still wearing that imitation gown, her borrowed bouquet left on the altar of the church. I heard later that she sat in her car in the church car park for over an hour before driving away. I heard that her own mother, my father's sister, called her that evening and did not speak softly. I do not know what Linda's consequences looked like in full. I do not know the details of what followed in the weeks after, but I know this: shame is its own reckoning. To be exposed before 300 people, family, friends, colleagues, strangers, and to have every layer of your life stripped back in real time, on a screen, with a timestamp, that is a weight a person carries for a long time. As for me, I walked back into that church in my real dress, with my real bouquet, with my mother on one arm and my father on the other, and I walked down that aisle to the man who knew, who had known in his bones that the woman who came to him first was not the one he loved. We said our vows, we signed the register, we danced until the Lagos night swallowed us whole.